Most people think social pressure is obvious. A boss demanding obedience, a friend pushing you into something uncomfortable, a crowd telling you what to think. But the strongest social pressure rarely feels like pressure at all. It feels like belonging. It feels like being included in the group chat, laughing at the same jokes, sharing the same opinions, wearing the same signals. Most people imagine conformity as something imposed from the outside, except reality behaves differently. Much of it comes from within. The uncomfortable truth is that people often volunteer for conformity long before anyone asks for it. Watch what happens in a meeting when someone disagrees with the room. The air changes. Nobody says anything threatening. Nobody needs to. The possibility of social friction is enough. The human brain evolved in environments where exclusion carried real consequences, and traces of that ancient logic still operate today. We instinctively scan for cues that tell us whether we are aligned with the tribe. The fear of standing alone often arrives before the need to fit in. And once that fear appears, a quiet rebellion becomes surprisingly difficult. Which raises a strange question. If social pressure is so powerful, why do some people seem immune to it? The answer begins with a misunderstanding about confidence. Most people assume confident individuals simply care less about what others think. But here's the strange part. Many of them care deeply. They just organize their priorities differently. When social approval and personal conviction collide, conviction wins. You can see this in ordinary moments. Someone declines an invitation without inventing an excuse. Someone chooses a different career path despite family expectations. Someone calmly says, "That's not really for me." Notice what is missing. No dramatic confrontation. No rebellion for the sake of rebellion. That sounds intelligent until you look closer, because many people believe resistance requires conflict. In reality, the strongest forms of resistance are often remarkably quiet. They do not attack the group. They simply refuse to surrender themselves to it. Peaceful resistance is often invisible from the outside, and that creates another psychological shift. Once people stop fighting every expectation, they begin noticing a different trap entirely. Comparison. Humans are natural social observers. We constantly measure ourselves against others because comparison helps us understand our position within a group. The mechanism is ancient. The consequences are modern. A person scrolls through social media and suddenly their life feels smaller. Their progress feels slower. Their achievements feel less meaningful. Nothing in their actual circumstances changed. Only the reference point changed. But this creates another problem. The comparison game has no finish line. There is always someone richer, smarter, younger, more successful, more attractive, or seemingly happier. Every victory becomes temporary because another comparison immediately replaces it. Comparison turns achievement into a moving target. And when fulfillment becomes dependent on external benchmarks, approval starts to feel essential, which leads to one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior: the need for validation. Most people imagine approval as something pleasant, a bonus, a reward, except reality behaves differently. For many people, approval quietly becomes a source of psychological stability. Compliments regulate self-worth. Praise confirms identity. External reactions determine internal certainty. This is why criticism can feel disproportionately painful. The criticism is not merely challenging an action. It feels as if it is challenging the self. But here's the paradox. The more approval someone needs, the less freedom they possess. Their decisions become negotiations with invisible audiences. Their choices pass through an internal filter. How will this look? What will people think? Will this disappoint someone? Dependence on approval is dependence on permission. And once people begin escaping that dependency, something unexpected happens. They often drift away from the mainstream, not because they are trying to be different, because genuine preferences rarely align perfectly with collective expectations. Look closely at many highly successful people. Their lives often appear unusual. Their schedules differ. Their habits differ. Their priorities differ. They frequently violate social scripts that most people accept without question. The common assumption is that success gives them permission to be unconventional. But this may reverse the relationship entirely. Their willingness to become unconventional came first. While others were optimizing for acceptance, they were optimizing for alignment. While others asked how to fit into existing patterns, they asked whether those patterns deserved obedience in the first place. And perhaps that is what quiet rebellion really means. Not rejecting society, not fighting everyone around you, not proving independence. It is something far more subtle. The moment a person stops treating social agreement as evidence of truth. Because the deepest form of freedom is not the ability to stand against the crowd. It is the ability to hear the crowd clearly and still recognize your own voice. Most people think attraction begins when we notice someone, a face, a voice, a personality. But attraction often starts much earlier than that. It begins inside the mind's prediction system. Long before people understand what they want, their brains are already calculating value, uncertainty, possibility, and reward. We like to believe desire is rational, that we choose what attracts us. Except reality behaves differently. Attraction frequently emerges from psychological forces operating beneath conscious awareness. Consider what happens when something becomes difficult to obtain. A limited opportunity suddenly feels more valuable. A distant person becomes more interesting. An unavailable possibility occupies more mental space than an available one ever could. The obvious explanation is that scarcity increases value. But here's the strange part. Often, scarcity increases attention before it increases value. The human brain is designed to investigate uncertainty. When access becomes limited, curiosity expands to fill the gap. We begin imagining possibilities, filling in missing information, creating narratives that may have little connection to reality. The unavailable is often attractive because it remains unfinished in the mind. You can see this everywhere. The text message that never arrives becomes more memorable than 10 conversations that did. The opportunity that slipped away feels larger than the one sitting directly in front of us. And once uncertainty enters the picture, another force begins shaping attraction. Confidence. Most people assume confidence is loud. They picture dominant personalities, endless self-assurance, and people who command every room they enter. But that image often confuses attention with influence. Quiet confidence operates differently. It does not demand recognition. It assumes it. A quietly confident person rarely spends much energy proving their worth. They do not rush to impress. They do not constantly seek agreement. They are comfortable allowing silence to exist. That sounds simple until you look closer. Because most social interactions contain hidden negotiations, people subtly compete for approval, status, validation, and certainty. They explain themselves too much, defend themselves too quickly, fill every pause before it becomes uncomfortable. A quietly confident person interrupts that pattern. Their calmness communicates something words cannot. I do not need this moment to confirm my value. And that message is surprisingly powerful, not because confidence is inherently attractive, because emotional stability is rare. When someone appears comfortable with themselves, other people unconsciously experience them as predictable, secure, and psychologically grounded. The attraction is not always toward the person alone. Sometimes it is toward the feeling their presence creates. But this creates another unexpected effect. The people who attract others most strongly are often the least dependent on attracting anyone at all. At first glance, that sounds contradictory. Yet human behavior repeatedly points in that direction. People are naturally drawn toward individuals who appear capable of standing on their own. Not because independence creates superiority, because it creates freedom. When someone can enjoy connection without needing it for survival, every interaction changes. Their attention feels voluntary rather than desperate. Their kindness feels genuine rather than strategic. Their interest feels authentic rather than transactional. Neediness asks for value. Independence signals value. This is why excessive pursuit often produces the opposite of its intended result. The harder someone tries to secure approval, affection, or attention, the more obvious the dependency becomes. Meanwhile, self-sufficient individuals communicate something different. They have a life that exists beyond the interaction, a purpose beyond the audience, an identity beyond the relationship. And that quiet sense of completeness changes how others perceive them. But here's the strange part. Independence alone does not make someone unforgettable. Many independent people are quickly forgotten. Many charismatic people are too. Which raises an interesting question. Why do certain individuals remain in our memories for years while others disappear almost immediately? The answer has surprisingly little to do with perfection. Most unforgettable people are not remembered because they were flawless. They are remembered because they created psychological contrast. They made others feel something distinct. Perhaps they listened more deeply than expected. Perhaps they spoke with unusual honesty. Perhaps they carried a perspective that challenged assumptions. Perhaps they seemed entirely comfortable being themselves in situations where everyone else was performing. Whatever the source, they disrupted predictability, and the human brain notices disruption. Memory is not built from repetition alone. It is built from difference. The unforgettable are rarely the loudest people in the room. They are often the most distinct. Think about the people who left lasting impressions on your life. Many were not celebrities. Many were not extraordinarily attractive. Many were not even present for very long. Yet something about them lingered. A conversation, a mindset, a way of seeing the world. A presence that felt unexpectedly real. Because lasting attraction is rarely about creating admiration. Admiration fades. Novelty fades. Even excitement fades. What remains is something deeper. The people we remember most are often those who seemed least concerned with being remembered. They were not constructing an image. They were expressing an identity. And perhaps that is the hidden science beneath human attraction. The strongest magnetism does not come from becoming more desirable. It comes from becoming less divided between who you are and who you think other people want you to be. Most people believe social intelligence is about reading people, facial expressions, tone of voice, body language, and those things matter. But the deeper level of social intelligence begins when you realize that words are often the least informative part of a conversation. People rarely say exactly what they mean. Not because they are dishonest, because human communication was never designed to transfer information alone. It was also designed to protect relationships, preserve status, avoid conflict, and maintain belonging. Watch a meeting where someone says, "That's an interesting idea." The sentence sounds positive, yet everyone in the room somehow understands that it might not be positive at all. How? Because humans constantly interpret context alongside language. We listen not only to what is said, but also to hesitation, timing, emphasis, energy, and omission. The unsaid often carries more weight than the spoken. A person says they are fine. Their voice slows slightly. Their eye contact disappears. Their enthusiasm evaporates. The literal message and the emotional message no longer match. And in that gap, real information emerges. But here's the strange part. The people who miss hidden intentions are usually listening harder than everyone else. They focus intensely on the words. Meanwhile, socially intelligent individuals distribute their attention across the entire interaction. They notice what changes when certain topics appear. They notice what people avoid. They notice where energy rises and where it suddenly collapses, because every conversation exists inside a larger social environment. And once you begin seeing that environment, another layer becomes impossible to ignore. Group dynamics. Most people walk into a room believing they are observing individuals. Except reality behaves differently. They are actually observing a living system. Every group develops invisible rules. Who speaks first? Who interrupts? Who receives attention? Who receives silence? Who people look toward when uncertainty appears? These patterns emerge so naturally that most participants never consciously notice them. Yet they shape almost every social outcome. Imagine a dinner table where one person tells a joke. Everyone laughs. Minutes later, another person makes an equally funny comment. Almost nobody reacts. The difference is not necessarily humor. The difference may be position within the social structure. Groups do not respond to behavior alone. They respond to who is displaying the behavior. That sounds unfair until you look closer. Humans evolved inside social groups where understanding relationships was essential for survival. As a result, our brains continuously track social positioning without requiring conscious effort. And that naturally leads to something most people claim not to care about. Status. The word itself makes people uncomfortable. Many imagine status as wealth, fame, or authority. But status systems are operating almost everywhere. In friend groups, workplaces, families, communities, even among people who openly reject hierarchy. The interesting part is that status rarely functions the way people assume. Formal titles tell only part of the story. The manager may possess authority. Yet another employee may possess influence. A parent may establish rules. Yet a grandparent may quietly shape decisions. A celebrity may command attention. Yet a trusted friend may shape beliefs more effectively. Status exists not merely in official structures but in patterns of human attention. Power is often visible. Influence is often hidden. And once you understand that distinction, an important question emerges. If formal authority and actual influence are not always the same thing, who is really making decisions? Most people look toward the person speaking the most, or the person with the highest title, or the person sitting at the head of the table. But social reality is often far more complicated. Watch carefully when a difficult decision appears. Notice where people glance before responding. Notice whose reaction they quietly measure. Notice which opinion ends debate rather than extending it. The real decision maker is frequently not the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes they barely speak at all. But when they do, everyone recalibrates. Their approval matters. Their disapproval matters. Their perspective changes behavior. And that influence may come from expertise, trust, experience, relationships, reputation, or years of accumulated credibility. The source matters less than the effect, because influence reveals itself through consequences. The most important person in the room is often the person everyone else is unconsciously adjusting to. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson of advanced social intelligence. It is not the ability to analyze people. It is the ability to see the invisible structures connecting them. To recognize that every conversation contains hidden intentions. Every group contains unseen forces. Every hierarchy extends beneath the surface. And every room has a center of gravity that most people never notice. The moment you begin seeing those invisible currents, social situations stop looking like collections of individuals. They start looking like maps of influence. And suddenly, behavior that once seemed confusing becomes remarkably predictable. Most people think high performance is easy to spot. They imagine visible ambition, constant activity, endless networking. A person always moving, always speaking, always being seen. But some of the most extraordinary performers are almost invisible. You rarely hear their names until after the results appear. While others are broadcasting effort, they are quietly accumulating leverage. This creates a strange illusion. We often confuse visibility with productivity because visibility is easier to observe. We can see meetings, presentations, announcements, and public achievements. What we cannot easily see are the thousands of private decisions that created those outcomes. A writer alone with a manuscript, an engineer solving a difficult problem, an entrepreneur refining a strategy nobody else understands yet. The work that changes lives often happens beyond public view. The loudest part of success is usually the final chapter. But here's the strange part. Low-profile achievers are not necessarily working harder than everyone else. Many are simply protecting something increasingly rare: attention. In previous generations, distraction was occasional. Today, distraction is infrastructure. Every notification competes for focus. Every platform competes for engagement. Every device competes for awareness. The modern economy is not merely selling products. It is competing for human attention. And attention has become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. That sounds dramatic until you look closer. A person spends 10 minutes checking messages, then switches tasks, then watches a short video, then responds to an email. The day feels busy, yet very little meaningful progress occurs. Why? Because deep work requires continuity. The mind needs time to descend beneath the surface layer of thought. Every interruption resets that process. The result is a life filled with motion but starved of momentum. Meanwhile, someone else disappears for 3 uninterrupted hours. No notifications, no interruptions, no audience. When they emerge, they have produced something tangible, something difficult, something valuable. Focus converts time into results. And as distractions increase, concentrated attention becomes a competitive advantage few people fully appreciate. But this creates another unexpected shift. The deeper someone becomes invested in meaningful work, the less interested they often become in external validation. At first glance, that seems backward. Wouldn't successful people want more recognition? Sometimes, but many eventually discover something surprising. Validation is addictive because it provides immediate emotional rewards. Progress is slower. Mastery is slower. Building something significant can take years. The brain naturally prefers applause over patience. Except reality behaves differently. Applause does not create excellence. Excellence sometimes creates applause. The distinction matters. When people become dependent on recognition, their behavior gradually changes. They begin optimizing for visibility rather than effectiveness. They choose what will be noticed rather than what will be useful. A post becomes more important than the skill. An announcement becomes more important than the achievement. A reputation becomes more important than reality. The need to be seen can quietly replace the need to improve. And that creates a trap many never escape. Because attention feels similar to accomplishment while requiring far less effort. But the highest performers often experience a different psychological transition. They stop asking, "How do I look?" and start asking, "What am I building?" The focus shifts from image to substance, from reaction to creation, from popularity to contribution. And once that shift occurs, another possibility emerges: the ability to build a powerful life without chasing attention. Most people assume success and visibility are inseparable, but history suggests otherwise. Some of the most influential individuals spend remarkably little time trying to attract notice. Their energy flows elsewhere, into skills, relationships, craft, knowledge, systems, long-term projects. While others compete for attention, they accumulate capability. And capability compounds. Attention is often temporary. Capability tends to endure. One creates moments. The other creates decades. Recognition can amplify value. It cannot replace it. And perhaps this is why quiet high performance feels so different from conventional success. It does not depend on being the most admired person in the room, or the most followed, or the most discussed. Its foundation exists somewhere deeper, because the strongest form of achievement is not built on public attention. It is built on private alignment. The alignment between what matters to you and what you repeatedly do. And when that alignment becomes strong enough, something remarkable happens. Success stops feeling like a performance for other people. It becomes the natural consequence of a life that no longer needs an audience to keep moving forward. And perhaps the most important realization is this: human behavior is not a collection of separate traits, habits, or decisions. It is a hidden system of forces shaping how we think, connect, pursue meaning, and build our lives. The moment you begin seeing those invisible patterns, you start seeing yourself differently. Thank you for spending this time with us on Relaxing Facts Studio. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and join us for future explorations of human psychology and behavior. Leave a like and share this video on your social media pages to help more people discover it. Most importantly, leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts, insights, and reflections. Your support is what keeps this channel growing and allows these documentaries to continue. Until next time, keep observing the hidden patterns that quietly shape the human experience.